Sometimes, when you're working on a project like this lawnmower, you might realize that you have more than one problem to fix, but several of them. And even though you might have picked it up for free, you might not be willing to spend hundreds of dollars on it. And you can only hope that all it needs is a simple fix to get it running like it should be. However, as you're about to see, the cost to fix all these problems could keep you from completing your project. In today's video, we're going to be looking at this Honda-powered lawnmower. And the problem is that even though this mower starts and runs, there are several problems we need to fix on it before we can sell it. Now, if you didn't see the last video about this mower, the seller said it had hit something hard in the yard and they couldn't get it started again. But what we found out during our inspection was that the entire mower was riddled with problems, most of them due to a lack of maintenance. That means the information that are on these stickers will be extremely important because it'll help us get the right parts we need. And one of those parts is a new blade to replace the one that was damaged from the hit. Now these are not cheap, which means the cost of this new blade will dig into the profits. Yet another part that needs to be replaced is the idler pulley for the drive belt. These unfortunately don't seem to last as long as the mower or the engine, so keeping a spare is a good idea. But the worst repairs have to do with the oil leaks from the engine, both of which are not fun to do. Now to make some room for us to do all these repairs, we need to take off some of the plastic pieces. Now these plastic guards might help to protect the items behind them, however, they also collect a lot of dirt and grass too. So what exactly is wrong with the old pulley? I mean, it's not broken and it looks perfect. Now I'm not going to blame you for asking because I thought the same thing too when I examined it. It doesn't appear to be stuck, but it's also not spinning the way that it should be though. But if we look on the other side, that's when we notice the damage to it. Now these bearings might be sealed, but time has a way of unsealing them which can destroy them. This must have been the first brand of mowers I'd ever worked on that had an idler pulley for the belt. Most of the other brands I've worked on used either belt tension or lever activated transmissions and never needed a pulley. Now the reason why a pulley is needed on this one is because of the design of the all-wheel drive systems that came on some of these. So if you did choose the all-wheel drive, you ended up with 3 of these pulleys. But since this one is only the front-wheel drive version, it only gets the one pulley. This next part is not one that I'm looking forward to. We need to get access to the rocker arms and the camshaft pulley under the valve cover. The reason why is because we need to do a valve clearance adjustment along with taking care of that nasty oil leak. When we first picked this mower up, the oil level was well below the low mark, which is not good for the engine. And one good reason why the level was so far down would be from a slow leak. Unfortunately, there's more than one leak, as I'll show you here once we get done fixing this one. I really don't like taking off this particular valve cover, and that's because they're sealed to the engine. That means we'll have to clean off all the old stuff before reinstalling the cover. Next, we'll rotate the engine, and with the help of a screwdriver, we'll find where the piston is at the top of its travel. Now another way to do this is to look for this bump on the camshaft lobe and line it up with the notch above it. And with the help of a mirror, you'll also see that these 2 marks under the camshaft pulley should be parallel with the edge of the engine. So I do see something disturbing though, and that is the flat spot on the rod for the camshaft pulley is facing the wrong direction. I'm not sure if it had a role to play in the oil leak, but I'm sure it didn't help out either. I'm also going to mark the flywheel to help locate it just in case I turn the engine by accident. So next, we're going to be checking the space between the top of the valves and the rocker arms. Now ideally, I would like this space to be the thickness of this feeler gauge, which is 5/1000ths of an inch. And to do that, we'll just put it into the space and see how it fits. Now the first one was very loose, which means we'll need to make that space smaller. However, the second one is so small that the gauge won't even slide into the space. Now to make our adjustments, we have to first loosen the jam nuts so we can turn the adjusting bolts. But before doing that, we'll need to slide in the 5/1000ths of an inch feeler gauge into the space. We'll then turn the bolts until the feeler almost gets stuck, and then we'll do the same for the other side, and once we're okay with them, we'll then tighten the jam nuts. You'll also need to hold on to the bolts to keep them in place while you turn the nuts. Otherwise, your adjustments might be off and you'll be right back in the same place you were before. Next, we'll be tackling that O-ring on the rod for the camshaft pulley, and for some reason, I decided to take both arms and the camshaft pulley out. But I will let you know you don't have to do this. All you have to do is push the rod down to replace the O-ring. Although, this does give us a chance to inspect the belt and the cam for any kind of wear, and fortunately, there's almost none that I can see. So at the bottom of the rod is the O-ring that keeps the engine oil from leaking out. Now I don't have a good answer as to why some of these end up leaking while others don't, but as you're about to see, it's not the only one either. We'll then gently take off the old one and then replace it with the new one. Now I'm very confident that there's a much better way to install this O-ring because if you're not careful, doing it this way could end up damaging it. And once the O-ring's been installed, we can start the process of putting all these parts back on. So I would definitely recommend taking pictures or video of this process. That way if you get confused, you'll have something to fall back on. Also, make sure the flat part of the rod for the camshaft pulley is facing forward. The reason why is because there's a tab on the valve cover that'll rest on that spot, keeping the rod from rotating. So once the arms and pins are back in place, now comes the part that no one likes, which is to clean off all the sealant from the cover and the engine. And if you don't do this and you try to apply sealant on top of the old stuff, there's a very good chance it's going to be a leak there. So I'm not going to tell you which sealant to use, that'll be up to you, but I'm sure some are better than others. Now I really don't like using this method to seal the valve cover, and the reason why is that I choose to wait until it's somewhat set up before I torque the bolts down. That means it could take 24 hours or more depending upon the amount of humidity in the air. However, the last one I did recently, I decided to make my own gasket and it turned out great, so I might start doing that from now on. So I thought I was done with the oil leaks on this engine. That was until I saw this spot. So what you're seeing is an oil leak from the shaft for the governor arm. But I will let you know that this leak is not very common, which can also be said about the other one we just did. So for this engine to have both failures is kind of rare and not in a good way either. Now you will have to be extremely careful when doing this repair, so I would go slow if I were you. After making a reference line across the shaft and the arm, we'll then take the arm off the shaft. And once the arm is out of the way, use some locking pliers to hold the shaft while you remove the clip. I'm really not sure if you can lose the arm inside the engine, but I don't intend on finding out today. So before we try and install the seal, we need to clean out as much of the dirt that's collected here in the opening. Otherwise, the dirt could damage the seal over time and we'll end up doing the same repair again. We'll then reposition the locking pliers to the back of the shaft so that we can install the seal on the end. Now I did put some oil on the inner part of the shaft, but it's up to you if you do the same. And once the seal is up against the pliers, you'll need to reposition them to the end of the shaft. And once the pliers have been repositioned, I like to use the open end of a small wrench to work the seal into the opening. So I'm very certain there's a much better way of doing this, but this is just what works for me. Now once the seal is sitting as far back into the block as possible, we'll then replace the clip and then the arm. One of the biggest problems with this repair is the possibility of accidentally changing the engine speed. Lower the speed and the mower might be slower at cutting the grass, but if it's too fast, you could damage the engine in no time. If you don't feel comfortable doing this particular part of the repair, I don't blame you. So is there anything wrong with just leaving it the way that it is, only that you could run the risk of having less oil in the engine and damaging it? But if you check your oil level every time you mow, then you could keep it up where it's supposed to be at. So I completely understand if you don't want to fix this particular oil leak. So besides needing the recoil cleaned and lubricated, this mower seems to be running quite well, all things considered. The biggest things we need to watch out for is making sure there's no oil leaking from the two spots we fixed, and I'm glad to report there are none. So what's the grand total for all the parts we had to replace? Well, that total was an eye-opening $46, and that's before taxes, which depending upon how much this sells for, could cut into the profits a bit more than you'd want them to. The blade was the most expensive of those parts, which just goes to show you, be careful what you run over with your mower. Fortunately, it didn't damage the engine too badly, but the next time might be a different story. So my question is, would you have bothered fixing the two oil leaks that were on this engine? Or would you take the easy route and just keep the oil topped off between uses instead? Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.